mind giving a brief introduction and then going into your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, David. Appreciate everybody's time today. Get a chance to kind of walk through the iScout platform and kind of show and tell functionality and features a little bit. We're a product that's 7-8 years old. We got started with development back in 2013, primarily in the oil and gas space, working with service companies. We've broadened that quite a bit as of late, and working not only with oil and gas service companies, but larger scale operators in the energy space, as well as power and utility, manufacturing, construction, agriculture, and so on. So as we kind of walk through, I'll do my best to kind of pinpoint just kind of the configurable nature of what iScout allows groups to do. We've learned along the way that industries may call things something unique to themselves, but like pinch points and struggles and issues are very common across all industries in just terms of health and safety, compliance, upkeep, communication to employees, and so on. So what I have today is just a demo site with a bunch of kind of fake data to give us some kind of example purposes as we go through it. There's a lot going on, and so I'm going to move relatively quickly. We can kind of collect questions and answer those at the end of the session. Certainly, as David mentioned, throw a chat out there, and I'm glad to kind of stop and get interrupted at any point in time. But I think we can move through this in 40 minutes or so is kind of the goal, to leave about 15 minutes on the tail end of the hour for any questions. So I'm just gonna dive straight in here. I'm gonna start by putting my app up on screen. And so iScout's a web-based, cloud-based program, but we do have native apps on iPhone and Android devices. So as groups are out in the field, obviously working away from their desktops, they may need to access various things, from a mobile device, and we've got apps for both Android and iOS. So I'll just kind of do a quick run through of what the app environment looks like. This very top kind of tab is this idea of a task list, and whether it be training that needs to be done, participation in some sort of an acknowledgement, or what we call a question of the day. And I'm going to knock a few of these out while we're in the app. Maybe signing into a safety meeting, inspecting an asset of some sort. There's just various things that kind of can proactively push out to employees based on, the health and safety curriculum, just data that's going out, just kind of systematically. What do people need to sign off on and address? And I'll just knock out one of these real quick. I'm going to do this question of the day, and I'm going to do this box knife without a safety tip is not permitted for use. So this bottom one is an example of what we call an acknowledgement, where a group may want to send out a reminder, a policy update, a weather warning, maybe lessons learned from an incident that happened a month ago, and we just want to communicate with employees a particular message. And it's just a way to push an email, a push notification, have a task, and we're just going to have them read through something, see an attachment, a file, an image, and kind of sign off that they've received that particular message. A lot of this is going to make a lot of sense when we get back into the website and look at the back end of this, but just a couple little quick things to show just kind of the employee engagement here a little bit. I'm going to do the question of the day as well. This is kind of an add-on to our training curriculum, just an additional element that can be added to a curriculum that's really designed to take seconds of somebody's time, but it's just again, a policy reminder, a training topic quiz question. I don't exactly know what this one's going to be, but we'll click on it. You'll hear narration and kind of a walkthrough, but this is what the employee would experience. Sorry, let me get my volume turned up here a little bit. And volume may be turned down, but this would kind of read over just kind of any details that we want to kind of state as part of this. And then we're going to go in and we're going to answer a quiz question. The employees would have a leaderboard, so depending on when they answered it, how the rest of the group answered it, there'd be a little bit of an insight about how we did and where I was positioned in the leaderboard. So again, this is an add-on kind of to a training curriculum where we're just dropping a 10-second engagement element, asking a question, gauging their input. And again, when we get into the website, we'll take a look at what that back end looks like. So that's this idea of a task list. Again, training, asset inspections. If there's a quota for filling out observation cards within a program, you can kind of proactively do all of those things. So the next tab down is just a profile, and this is going to be a profile of the individual. We kind of think of this as like an electronic wallet of just information about the employee. We do allow for some third-party barcoding to be available here if there's some other external program that employees are expected to carry cards or whatnot. One of the bigger elements down here is this active training list. And so this would be a place where I can just house all my training information and even kind of go full screen with training documentation. So if I'm out in the field or out in the shop or the yard or whatever the case might be, and employees are expected to carry training records on them. Oops, sorry about that. This just provides it in a electronic format, and this is available offline. So if they're ever doing a delivery and outside of cell phone service and they're asked to verify that they're competent to operate a certain piece of machinery and that's being tracked and managed, they would have access to those training credentials there. There is a forms section, and we're going to kind of come back to this here in a second, but really any form, inspection, report that a group is using, they would have the ability to build that into iScout, and it's a form that's available to fill out through the app. These can also be filled out in offline environments. So if I happen not to have connectivity, I can still do my pre-job checklist, my hot work permit, you know, whatever those traditional paper forms might be. We feel like we got a great path to get those designed and built out in iScout to be able to be filled out again through the app. So we're going to come back and fill out one here in a second. Just a couple other things to show before we do that. There is a resources section, and this is just a place to post health and safety policies and procedures, SOPs, SDS. Like if there's something that might be a paper copy or a manual that employees are expected to have access to or to be able to retrieve that type of information quickly, it can be loaded in this resource section and then just be made available even in an offline environment. They could access a copy of whatever that documentation is. So again, just kind of a platform that you can post those things. When we get into the website, I'll briefly show kind of the management of change procedures for this. So if you have a document that you're tracking revisions, you'd have the ability to load the new version, mark the kind of the history of that, and have access to that kind of on an ongoing basis. So we'll go in and we're going to fill out a very quick form, and then we'll kind of jump into the website a little bit. But I'm going to go with the near miss report, and it's really just answering the fields. These would all be custom. So what I am filling out is completely authorable, editable. I mean, at the end of the day, forms would be basically terminology of the customer and flow of how they want this to work. There are some strategies really to try to simplify this. Like if we can avoid a lot of non-applicable questions, then we want to do that just to make it as simple as possible to fill out the form. One example under category, if I hit, okay, well, I'm going to say this is a driving category, you're going to see a new field that will populate itself where I can choose from a predetermined list of kind of driving items. If this were a working category, then this would kind of flip over to these predetermined working elements that I want employees to be able to kind of sign off on. That's one very small example of, I mean, a more complex might be, hey, this is an incident report. What type of incident was it? Well, if it's an injury or illness, you need one set of information to be filled out. And if it's a motor vehicle accident or some sort of property damage event, that's going to require a completely different set of questions. So you can open up new questions based on how previous questions get answered. I'm just going to go through and we're going to click on a handful of these. There's also kind of the ability to make sure we're capturing data. So fields could be set as mandatory, you know, if they should always be able to answer this particular question. You can add photos. You could add movie clips. I'll take a picture of a water cup here on the desk. Whoops, sorry. Could add a caption to that, water cup. So you can add one or multiple images, again, or little movie files if that's helpful to do. Sometimes walking around an asset that's sounding awkward or difficult might be good to embed inside of a form. This little more button off to the side gives us a couple options where we could add those attachments, those images or movie files. We could add notes, and we also have an item called follow-up. Now this might make sense in some forms and not for others, but if I'll send myself a quick follow-up. This is a way that I can just open up an item. I want to track it to closure. I'm going to send this to Derek Brown, and I'm going to ask him to get it done by Friday, and just say, please clean up this job site. You know, whatever that message might be. We do have, and really this is kind of device specific at times, but if you can do kind of voice to text, especially if you're including in long amounts of information. But I'll go ahead and just submit this form. Now it's going to post in my recent report section. So if I wanted to get back into this form, I could do that relatively quickly. I'm going to see all the data that we included here. I could even edit and add to it if needed. But forms are available in an offline environment. So if I submit it, it's going to cache on my device until I'm back into service. This recent reports section is just a place to verify whether or not the server has received the response, and in this case, it has with that green check mark. Before I leave the app, let's knock out that follow-up. So I'm logged in as this Derek Brown person, and I sent myself a follow-up. Well, follow-ups are those action items that we can distribute out and then kind of track to closure. They can go as email or push notifications, but they're also going to sit in the task list. So if I'm an hour away and someone just tasked me with this, eventually I can work myself back towards getting it done. So if I wanted to see the response and see the information I was being asked to address, there's a couple ways I could resolve this. I could just type in a message, all clean here. You could require a signature take place. You could require like a before and after picture. There's some behaviors within a follow-up that can be predetermined. But I'll just go ahead and save that. Now that'll remove that off my task list, and we're going to take a look at what this looks like when we get into the website. I am going to come back to the app and just show very quickly kind of the code scanner feature and the value that can provide from an asset perspective. But for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of keep on moving here. And David, feel free to interrupt me if we need to stop for questions. But I'm going to jump into the website, and we're going to kind of poke around here just a little bit. So the same ability to view my task list is going to be available here, and this is going to stay in step with the app. So, I knocked off a few while I was in the app, and you can see those are no longer here on my task list. But if I needed to get in and include my signature on a training that I completed, I could knock that out. That's an example of kind of going completely paperless, even with your sign-in rosters. If you're doing and hopefully we get back to this at some point soon, but classroom sessions, we've got safety meetings we're kind of pulling everybody in from. There's certainly ways you can have paper signatures, but that's kind of an example of what I just did, to go paperless with it and just send a task for them to sign in that they participated in a particular safety meeting. Each person's going to have a profile, and so all of the data that's captured here is completely configurable to the in group. So, what is they may call it locations, shop, yard, facility, project, lines of business might be, department, service line, all of those things are something that can be modified to the terminology that the group uses. But you can also track any additional data back against the employee that's helpful. So there's a lot of custom field settings that can be created. This is also where we're going to be able to kind of capture the employees' training records and history and kind of where they stand and what's due and so on. If they're having their driver files managed, if they're have some acknowledgments signed off, what assets are assigned to them. This is kind of a central point of all things related back to that particular employee. So just know each person that has access to the site or being managed by the site would have a profile page that looks just like this one here. So I'm going to show kind of just the forms side, and the same ability from a desktop that I had on my app to fill out a form is available. It's going to behave in the exact same way. So conditional fields will open up where I can kind of choose and click through and add photos and sign off and all those kind of things. But this is really where you're going to also kind of look at information coming in. So let's grab this near miss report, and I've got a bunch of fake responses run. Maybe I want to look at the last 3 months of near miss reports, and I'll throw a few fields on screen. Maybe I want to just have the office kind of stick and the lines of business and maybe severity, category, and so on. So these are kind of sticky headers that would hold true here. This first line, this would have been the report we just submitted, the response that just came through. So there's a couple things we're going to kind of track by default. One, we're going to drop a pin of where the person was. We'll call them the observer, where the observer was at the time of submitting the report. And this becomes an interactive pin drop where you could kind of scope down and hone in a little bit. We're also going to include a weather link. So this can be meaningful if we're trying to capture weather conditions from a motor vehicle accident or something along those lines. But it's going to go ahead and know, based on the positioning of the device, what the actual weather was up until the time of submission, and then a forecast for the remainder of the day. We're also going to have duration posted, so we're going to know start time, stop time. This took 3 minutes to fill out this report. Where this can be helpful is if I have a facility audit that, if done right, it should be no less than an hour. I have a little bit of insight there. If this was done in 3 minutes and an hour really is what should be done, then there's an opportunity to coach this employee up a little bit on just the duration of time they took to get it completed. So we have that kind of back end insight available for all. You can kind of see the data associated here, the images and or the movie clips would be embedded. This could be dumped into an Excel document, a PDF document, if you wanted to actually provide a copy of this externally, print off, whatever the case might be there. But these also remain in this live dynamic state. So maybe we did a little bit of investigation. Maybe we investigate all high severity events. We investigated this when we come to learn, you know what, it's not really high. This was really less of an issue than originally thought. So I could move that down, resubmit this form. So my form and my data is updated, but I'm going to have this history of any changes, who changed it, time and date, and what fields were changed, to have some transparency there. All of what I'm doing is completely controlled by a roles and permissions grid. So if an employee shouldn't have rights to make edits, or they can only edit their own, there's a bunch of opportunity there to kind of control that. But this is just looking at an individual form. There is a very quick way to view like longer look backs analytically. So maybe I want to look at the last 2 months of near miss reports. Let's open up a few more. We'll go to the last 6 months. And I'm just curious, maybe before a safety meeting, hey, what have been the top categories that we've had? So this is going to throw together a very quick bar graph and pie graph of that data. I could scope it above if I'm only interested in looking at a certain field office or project or maintenance shop. I could scope accordingly, and that would then be reflective below. But this is going to give me a place where I could look at the top working categories. What are the top unsafe actions? What are the top body parts affected or potentially affected? Any select field that's inside of a form is going to give this very quick analytic view of the data. It can all be dropped into Excel or a couple custom PDFs, but a lot of the output options for the form responses, we kind of determine what do you want to see, and then we build the forms accordingly. Obviously, like select fields are easier to have an analytic view than just a wide open text box. But that's just a very quick, and I know I'm moving very quickly, but I guess one point just really to emphasize is we give groups the ability to come in and build any form, and here's the different field types that you would have access to. Build any form that you want to make available inside of the app to be filled out by employees or a group of employees. That's going to have the same flow into kind of a response bucket. We do have a library of some pre-built forms. You'll see some COVID related stuff in here, but if I didn't have a forklift inspection and wanted a starter, I could import in from this forms library, and then I could make edits to it as I wanted to. We don't call it this, we call it that, or I want it to flow a little bit differently, but ultimately you work towards the ability to fill out a forklift inspection. And I can go through and answer those questions and so on. So there's a lot of strength inside of the forms builder to create obviously health and safety related items, but it can also be any other data collection needs that are coming in remotely and have access to have them all go into a specific server to be able to filter and kind of digest that information. Now, a couple things I want to show relatively quickly. I showed the employee's profile. There are some ways to set up automatic notifications of reports. And so maybe I'm in charge of health and safety for this account, and I want 100% of the incident reports submitted to send me an email and a push notification to my iPhone anytime it's submitted. So that's this idea of real-time movement of that information in those reports. I could scope it down a little bit. Maybe I don't want the volume of like all near miss reports coming through, but I do want the ones that are concerning. So maybe I get a push to my iPhone, but I'm going to make these conditional and say, hey, only send these to me when the severity is critical or high. And so in the employee's mind, if they come across a significant near miss that is concerning enough for them to mark it as a higher severity issue, I'm going to be made aware of that with a push notification right away. But the rest of it, I'll look at later. So based on how the forms are created and the fields in there, I can then schedule what do I want in a real-time fashion based off of that. Now, there's also a way to have more of a scheduled report. And this would be, I'll just open this example up here. This would be like, I get those severe near misses in real time. I want to be made aware of them right away, but I do want to see reports coming through 100% of all near misses. So I could set up a weekly near miss report. It's going to run on Fridays at 4:30. Maybe I want all near misses, not just severity level being critical. And then I can kind of pick and choose what data do I want. Do I want spreadsheet? Do I want certain columns? Do I want the who filled them out? Like, you can have several attachments here, determine who needs to get this, and then I can save that. And this becomes a report that's going to run Fridays at 4:30. That's a 7-day look back to all near miss reports submitted throughout the week. So all of those same features, instant notifications, and then these scheduled reports become true for any report that you might build inside of the site, regardless of what it is. So accounting may want some end of the week summary on asset usage, or whatever it looks like there. So that's just a matter of building the form and then scheduling the reports. The reports module is a very big module for us. I mean, it's we see 10,000, 20,000 reports coming through on a daily basis. So it's highly utilized feature. So that's the forms module. And there are different ways to kind of break down the data and kind of dissect and see who's doing what and what follow-up reports are there. Let me show that example real quick, because I had closed out that follow-up on this near miss report that I had submitted. And just to kind of show this as well, if you're sending follow-ups from a form response, then any closure is going to embed itself into the form. So if I had a before and after picture, that would embed itself here as well. But I get this log of communication between all parties involved in a particular follow-up that an item was closed. But I can also get reports to say, hey, show me all open follow-ups. All that kind of stuff can be kind of proactively sent to an administrator. But that's the forms section. Again, I know I'm moving relatively quickly, but for the sake of time, glad to answer questions as we go on the back end. The training module is also a pretty large one for us, and I'm going to move through this relatively quickly as well. But this would give you the ability to load your training curriculum. You can determine a lot of behavior on how this training needs to be scheduled. Who is it required for? Is it something that, hey, this is a rolling schedule. If you're assigned to do it, you just got to make sure this is done every 2 years. We do have a window option. Some group want to like strategically position a training throughout the course of the year. Example, hot work or not hot work, heat management might make a lot of sense to do that in April or May as we're getting ready to deal with hot months, or conversely with cold weather in the wintertime. So you may want to like position those where they open and become required at certain moments of the year. Otherwise, you can set them as rolling. And then who is it required for? Is it everyone? Is it no one? Or is it limited based off of any of those employee conditions? So, hey, if your job title is one of these 5 things, this is a requirement for you. If you work in this field office, if you assigned to this building, whatever the case might be, you kind of have this ability to create this training matrix that then, as I showed Derek Brown's profile here, the site's going to know based on my profile, what are the relevant trainings for me and what am I kind of responsible for keeping up with. Those all would be tasks generated back to my task list when they're expiring or becoming due, where I could knock those out myself. Or I could give notice of, hey, this is a external training. We need to bring an out-of-house trainer in for it. Contact your supervisor to schedule this. Or, you kind of give some instructions inside of the task. This is also where you can kind of get a view of just how are we doing from a training perspective, the training status report. So I'm going to just look at our entire curriculum and all employees. This first view is by topic. What's the percentage of completion that we have? The second view would be a breakdown by employees. So who's got any training missing? What's their individual percentage of completion based on their requirements? I could scope this if I'm visiting the Houston office, and that's really all I really care to see right now. I've got 17 employees, and they all looks like they have something expired. And there's a couple more granular views you could have to kind of break down that data. There's a kind of a true x-axis, y-axis view of this. Some people get really excited about good old-fashioned spreadsheets here, but this would be a color-coded view. Again, you can scope the topics and the people, but this would be a kind of a date stamped, color coded view of kind of where you stand from just kind of another view. Any and all of this can be scheduled as a rule, or scheduled as a scheduled report. So on Monday mornings, if we want to send the Houston office, hey, here's a listing of all of your expiring or incomplete employees, and this needs to go to 3 members of the Houston management team, they're going to get a report that looks just like this in PDF or Excel. It's going to list out what topics, what employees, are kind of lagging behind in certain topics. So that's a really quick look at the training setup. It's configurable to a point that really it can just kind of wrap around your preferences from how your training needs to move and who it's assigned to. There's a group training list when we get back into classroom training. I'm visiting the Houston field office. I could pre-populate a sign-in sheet. Some groups just really get excited about this. Sorry, so I could pre-populate this. I could print off a copy of a roster if I actually wanted people to, to kind of submit this, sign off. Then this becomes an attachment I could include, but maybe I discover, Willard wasn't here, Lou Myers wasn't here, and Aura didn't make it. Everybody else was good. Type in my notes, add my files, and I could hit done. It's going to populate those 14 people's profiles that they've completed that training on that date. Can always get back in and modify those group trainings. Just a quicker, easier way to maintain the data and updating people's training records. All of that would kind of flow back to them accordingly. So that is a massively large module with a bunch of features that I just kind of gave like 5-minute overview of, but a lot going on and a lot of configurable elements to how you would want that to flow. The other side of training for us are the lessons. And we have a lesson builder that would allow you, we have a training add-on component that would allow you to drop in pre-built training content. So maybe I have an active shooter that I want to utilize. I could pull that in. I think I'm having a little bit of challenge with my audio running through, but I'm going to play this one and let's just see if it will play. But when a lesson is attached to a training topic and it's assigned, I can kind of self-satisfy this. So if I go and click this, it's going to take me So there's some sound. You can take me straight into the lesson. I'm just going to play this very quickly.
The objectives of this lesson are to discuss general ladder safety. By the time the lesson is over, you should be able to recognize the importance of ladder safety. Identify common causes of ladder accidents. Select and inspect ladders correctly. Set up ladders properly. Climb and work on ladders safely, and maintain, store, and transport ladders properly. Ladder accidents are a common cause of workplace injuries, and in some cases can cause death. These injuries can be serious, causing employees to be disabled or unable to return to their regular jobs, and recovery can be slow and painful. Your safe use of ladders is important to protect you and others from experiencing an accident. Ladder accidents rarely result in serious injuries. True.
So I'm just going to answer a couple quick questions here, and then we'll knock this out real
Match the
quick.
ladder name to the corresponding image. Step ladder. Step stool.
Oh, I already got that one wrong.
And platform ladder. Match the ladder name to the corresponding
Let's try
image.
that again. So we're going to go step ladder,
Platform ladder. Step ladder.
platform ladder,
And extension ladder.
step stools. Sorry about that. Got a little ahead of myself. And I'm still incorrect.
Match the ladder name.
You would think
to the
I'd have this figured
corresponding
out.
Step stool. Platform ladder. Step ladder. And extension ladder.
Finally, okay. I need to go back and redo my entire ladder safety program because it's a little embarrassing. So I've completed that on my own. You're going to see that it took it off of my task list. Back on the employee's profile, we're going to track those training completions. So I did have this one that was due, but I just did it today. It's going to reset to remind me to take that refresher next year. We'll drop a certificate of completion automatically. There's also a transcript view of how much time, what was the duration, and the score, the final score of this individual. So all that'll kind of automatically flow back here and mark that complete. What I want to quickly show is just the flexibility you have from a lesson standpoint. So we did this ladder safety training, this really quick 3-slide lesson. Well, a lot like our forms, we want to make sure you have full author rights just to do whatever it is that's needed. So it might be something very unique with this initial slide. Maybe this bullet is irrelevant for you. Here at PPI, this is a new bullet. You can come in and change the on-screen bullets. You could change the graphics. You could make them a video loop, change the imagery to your assets, your people, your facilities, kind of customize that. And then it's also the narration is completely editable as well. So here at Plastics Pipe Institute, this is a big deal. So sit back and listen up. So anything that you type in there, the narrator is going to say that. So it allows you, if there is something unique, if there's a tool, a hazard, something that's maybe not the norm that does apply to your business and your employees' risks, then that can be incorporated in quite easily. You have the ability to change background tracks, and there's various options here. But now if I were to save this and just go back in, you'll just kind of hear those very simple adjustments that I made.
Here at Plastics Pipe Institute, this is a big deal. So sit back and listen up.
So whether it be the content that's available through our training module, or if a customer wants just to build their very own from scratch, and we see this quite often where you might have your own standard operating procedure for a very unique process, and you want to train on that, the ability to come in and create those slides and have that narration and those images. Customers have the full ability to kind of create whatever it might be that's needed. Of course, that takes some time, and our support team is certainly here to help. We also have partnered with a group, KPA Services, and there's a sister company that is creating some very industry-specific content. And we have an example here of a stop work program. I'll just play maybe just the front end of this if it'll run for us. This would
The
be,
safety material you are about to see is intended.
for the sake of time, I'm going to hold off on that, but that's what's called a Scorm file. And there can be some very specific industry focused. It's more video based, more, again, what we call a Scorm lesson, where that's just a file type that's played. But this group is going to allow us to offer even more content through an iScout account, which is pretty exciting, and have it be very, very industry focused, which is really exciting to have an opportunity to kind of work alongside David and the Plastics Pipe Institute team, just to kind of understand what those might be and what offerings can we add. But that's the training side. Again, I'm moving very quick for the sake of time, but one thing just to kind of reiterate is really any lesson that comes into the site, or any lesson that you want to create to make it task driven, self-serve for your employees, you have the ability to create your own or edit at any point in time any of the in-house content, and kind of really mold it around you. Especially in light of just, we're not really getting together for training right now, and people are spread apart. This kind of gives you the ability to stay compliant with your programs and or enhance those even kind of during a COVID timeframe. So that's the training and the lesson side of iScout. There's also kind of a full analytic view. I'll just briefly kind of click around and show some of this. But if you were curious to, hey, in the last 90 days, how we performed on quizzes that employees have done, as a lesson, I'm going to have the top missed quiz questions and then a kind of a breakdown. So not only are we tracking, like on that status report, just who's done it and who hasn't, who's compliant and who's not, but how are we actually answering these questions? And is there an opportunity for us to reiterate an item, at an upcoming safety meeting or whatever the case might be? This might be a good time to talk about this particular question, because 1 out of every 5 people missed it. So an opportunity just to clarify, or we could reword the question or add a slide to provide more content. I didn't get too much into the question of the day, but I answered this in the app, as you guys may recall right there at the beginning. The question of the day is just a pre-programmed way to send out a quiz question, a did you know, a quick policy reminder. Maybe it hits certain groups on Mondays at 8 a.m. and it's, again, just 10-15 seconds of their time. They kind of become engaged, and you'd still have that same back-end ability to see how employees answered certain questions. A lot like those quiz results, you'd be able to kind of look at that. It's been a very cool feature add-on that groups are using, kind of leaning into that micro learning, smaller touch points throughout perhaps the course of the week or the month, just a way to pre-program that in what we call the QOD, which is question of the day. I'm going to take a couple minutes and just run through equipment real quick. I know we're coming up here on about 2:45, and then I want to be able to slow down here for questions. But this is another pretty big module for us. When we designed this out, our mentality was around safety-related assets, or assets that have some sort of an inspection schedule requirement. Fire extinguishers are a good example, where I need a monthly, an annual, a 6-year, a 12-year, and so on. Fall protection assets, catwalks, gas monitors. But then there could be other pieces of equipment, conveyor belts, trash compactors. There's some things that just need a frequent inspection, and groups have maybe their own cadence for how they want that to kind of work. But this, a lot like a person, an asset would have its own profile. Everything that's being managed here is completely configurable on what you want to track. So size and type makes a bunch of sense for a fire extinguisher, and make, model, year might be what you're tracking on a vehicle. So I'm going to quickly open my app back up and kind of show kind of this interaction with the code scanner. But as you can see here, we have a QR code that's going to automatically be created for every asset. That can be printed off directly out of the site. It can be stuck to an asset, an entryway to a facility. whatever the case might be of what this asset is meaningful for. But if I go to my code scanner here and I scan that in, it's just going to take me straight to the profile of this asset. So I could retrieve attachments, if there's links to how-to videos, if there's something that's meaningful. I could also inspect this with permission that I have, all good. I could fill out that quick checklist and kind of mark that complete. And if I refresh this page, then that's going to keep in step here with this one. And this would be kind of this log history of all these inspections performed over time. This was a task in my task list. I just completed it from my app, but it removed itself off. So I've kind of done that. It's going to remind me when it's coming to kind of the next go around. From an administrative standpoint, a higher view, I could say, hey, I'm interested in expiring or expired assets in the Kansas City office. I only have one. Maybe I choose Kansas City and Denver, see if I get more. So this could also be a scheduled report that Monday mornings, whoever's in charge of the shop, perhaps we send them a expired or expired asset report. Each of these individuals would have a task waiting on them to kind of deal with it. But this is just a way to kind of get out of spreadsheets, kind of have some interaction between, you know, what's the requirement for this asset, and then some oversight and a little bit different view of what needs to be done. From a management perspective, you'd have access to all that kind of data in real time. We've got groups doing all of these kind of things, trucks, trailers, heavy equipment. That's also something we're seeing quite common in as well. Again, just trying to get out of paper, out of spreadsheets, and making information readily available to others out in the field. This is a great way from an asset standpoint to allow that to happen. So I'm gonna take 2 minutes and we're gonna mow through very quickly the control panel, but there's a lot of configurable aspects. Like that's a big focus for us, is to design the software in a way that can just adapt as necessary. And we bend quite a bit. Hopefully we don't break, but there's groups doing all kinds of stuff that's very unique to their processes, and the software just allows them that to happen. But I'm gonna click through and just show a few things. This is that acknowledgement that we signed off on before. And this is just a place to kind of gauge performance and who has and hasn't signed off. But I can push these out as needed. And it can be to predetermined groups. Maybe I have a policy change, but it's only reflective of our electrical team, and I just want to send it to that department, or I just want to send it to a certain location. I have the ability to send my message. What am I including? And then who does this need to apply to? Maybe it's only a certain, maybe it's just our concrete division. This is a new policy change for them. Type in my message and hit send. And now I've just sent out 18 acknowledgements that would have buzzed phones, tasks, created, all that to kind of track and sign off on that particular message. This dovetails a little bit with resources, but this is kind of that back end I had mentioned. And this is where maybe a log, kind of that management of change log would reside, if I can get an example here. But let's say I had a policy change to our BBS program. I want to upload the new version. This is going to be where I can see the different versions, even get back into the history of the document. But I could update the document, describe changes. I could save and create an acknowledgement directly from here if I want to push this out for employees to sign off on acknowledge. There's some shortcuts for that to happen. Roles and permissions is a big one. Ultimately, you can control what can employees view, what can they edit, what can they create, what they can delete. And it may be very one way where they kind of see themselves and they can push information in. Maybe managers can do a little bit more, admins can do everything. You can add new roles as needed. So if I wanted to create a supervisor role, I have a starting point of cloning my manager role, and now I'm going to kind of create these limitations on what a supervisor can do, and now I can assign employees as a supervisor role with those restrictions. So whether it be access to other employee information, form responses, training information, all of that can be separated out and blinded as needed based on that roles and permissions grid. There's a lot of data that gets moved in and out of the site. So one way that we have created is for spreadsheets. This is really an onboarding strategy for sure, where if I've got 5,000 assets and 300 employees, and I have my training curriculum already kind of in a spreadsheet format, I could just auto create those things by ingesting a spreadsheet. And this kind of gives instructions about how to do that. Of course, our support team is here to help navigate that. We do have an open API that's both readable and writable. So if there is some sort of a programmatic connection between an HR system and our program to keep employees updated, create new, terminate those that are no longer here, whatever the case might be, that's another way to move data in and out, and kind of keep in step with maybe another system that's doing that. We do have, there's so much I'm kind of leaving out here, but we do have an OSHA case kind of management module. This would be a place where you could track your establishments, track your hours. There'd be the view of TRIR, kind of how you're doing within each establishment, within each group. You can print out your 300s, your 301, all of that can be kind of dumped directly out of here. But this would be just a real-time view of kind of how the team's performing with all those kind of metrics applied. That's just part of the general iScout package, is the management of that. Scheduled tasks, that's something if groups might have a quota, maybe they have an initiative to get their observation BBS program, up and running. This is a place where I could just schedule, hey, I'm going to send a task out on Mondays. I'm going to track who has and hasn't got an observation card in for the week. But this is a whole new area that you would have some controls to see participation, what employees have done it. Maybe I want to look at an all-time range. This would be kind of that breakdown of, what their percentage has been the last 2 weeks. This group has not done very well. These are our goody two shoes that are getting it done and making an effort. But this would be a way you can kind of just track, almost a quota kind of a mentality, if you're expecting employees to actually fill out a form and participate in a particular program. The equipment, as you kind of saw, you can schedule inspections when those need to happen on the first of the month, every year, those kind of things. So that's a little bit like the scheduled task, but scheduled task just is this real arbitrary way to create it without having to tie it back to a particular asset. So DQ files, this is the last thing I'll touch on, I'll promise, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions. But we found a lot of our customers were trying to, they had regulated drivers that they had to keep up with their driver documentation on, and they were kind of shoehorning that into the training module. Well, we just felt after looking at that it made total sense to separate those completely and detach them from a access to information standpoint and just a general involvement. So there's a way to look at employees, what requirements are coming due, all those same features. The ability to kind of run those reports and, hey, I'm curious to expiring or incomplete documentation and what employees have stuff missing. So again, trying to be as ahead of the game and avoid, non-compliance from a driving perspective. If an employee needs to go get their med card or their driver's license is overdue, something along those lines. So that's another. It functions a lot like training. But it's just, again, kind of detached here. So a lot of other elements here to really kind of configure the site. We try to just let the customers have full access to whatever those adjustments are. And of course, we're here for help. But that is, so I'm at 40 minutes, 45 minutes right now with 9 minutes to spare. I'm glad to dive deeper, clarify, answer any questions that you guys have.
Darren, let me start by thanking you for your presentation. Again, the safety committee was very impressed with not only the amount of information that your software covers in regards to safety and training and just documentation for OSHA, et cetera, but also the flexibility to customize it. And I did want to make folks aware that iScout was willing to work with PPI, so our members actually get a discount for this software if you're interested in moving forward with it. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll open this up to Q&A.